Hello chess fans, this is Rick from Chess to Progress with number 19 in the series Viewers Games. This one is from Carlos from the Dominican Republic. Carlos says, "Good morning Rick, thank you for your channels, they have helped me to improve at this captivating game. Here is a link to a game that I won with the black pieces against a higher rated opponent. I think it is notable what to do with your pieces on the discover check for both the attacking and the defending player. And of course any input on my mistakes will be well received. Carlos." Okay, let's have a look at Carlos' game. Carlos was black in his game and he played against an opponent with the name of Valera Karyakin 174 on Lichess. e4, Carlos opened e5 and g3, and Carlos played knight f6, attacking the e4 pawn. And here white made a very strange move. f2, f3, what is this? If you're worried about your e4 pawn being unprotected, what is more logical than play bishop g2, which you are intending to do anyway after playing g3? Or knight c3, of course, is a very reasonable move as well. But white played a very strange move, f3, to protect the e4 pawn. Strange move, bad move. d6 from Carlos, bishop g2, knight c6, knight e2, bishop e7, both players castled, and f4. It's good that white played f4. That pawn on f3 was a very strangely positioned piece, but of course the pawn could have gone to f4 in one go. So white has just lost time with this f2, f3, f4 maneuver. Carlos played b6, d3, bishop b7, and c3. Again, a strange move from the bishop pawn. White's queenside is still at home, still undeveloped, and white decides to play this little pawn move. It's not a terrible move, but yeah, the knight really wants to be on c3, and you just want to put your pieces into play, you want to finish your development, so c3 is really not a move that comes to mind first. Carlos plays rook b8. Of course, Carlos really has developed his pieces very well, put his king safe. Very healthy play so far from Carlos. Rook b8, I guess, is a prophylactic move to protect the bishop in case that diagonal comes open. It was not really necessary, but it's not a bad move. White decides to take on e5. Carlos takes back with the knight, and knight f4. Here Carlos, who has played very cautiously and very sensibly so far, plays an aggressive move. He plays here g5. Very aggressive, very committal, moving a pawn in front of the king just to kick a knight away. It's dangerous. Here white should have played the knight to d5 or back to e2, and back to e2 is not an easy move because you just played the knight from e2 to f4. It's not easy to take back that move, but in this case it would make sense because black has weakened himself somewhat. But instead Valera Karyakin played his knight to h5, which is a bad move as it costs material. Carlos took on h5, the queen has to take back, and now knight takes d3, just wins a pawn. It's an important pawn because now also the e4 pawn is weaker, and black then threatens to take the bishop pair by taking on c1. For the moment pawn g5 is defended well enough, and the white queen cannot do much damage to the king just by herself. So taking on d3 would have been a good move here, but maybe Carlos was somewhat worried about his king and he decided to play knight g6 to get a defender close to his king. And that's one of the difficult things in chess. Sometimes you should indeed not grab a pawn because there are more important things happening on the board, and sometimes it is better to take the material. In this case, black's king was not in trouble and taking on d3 was the right move. Okay, knight g6 was played and knight d2 from white. bringing that knight into play finally. And here Carlos played f6. He anticipates the knight coming to f3, and after that move the g5 pawn would be attacked 3 times. So he already protects it. Knight f3 came, and here good moves for black are knight e5 or bishop a6, both with the idea to put pressure on the weak pawn on d3. But Carlos made a mistake. He played rook f7. We have to forgive Carlos for this mistake. By the way, I didn't say yet what the rate of play was. It was 13 minutes for the whole game plus a 2-second increment. So the players had quite a bit of time to think. Rook f7 is a tactical mistake, but not easy to spot. White didn't spot it. What White could have played here, the strongest move, is knight takes g5. Indeed not easy to spot, because if you take back on g5, then White swaps the rooks and takes on h7, and suddenly White has a very strong attack against black's king. King f8, and now the strongest move is another very difficult move to see, is bishop takes g5, another piece sacrifice. The idea of this piece sacrifice is to be able to activate the rook on a1 quickly. Instead of bishop takes g5, White can also just take the piece on g6 and it's much better. But after the bishop takes g5 piece sacrifice, if black takes it, then White takes on g6, and the black king is in big trouble with rook a1 to f1 coming next. So that was possible after rook f7. White didn't see it, and he played another move that makes sense, bishop h3, with the threat of bishop e6 winning material. Carlos saw that and played bishop c8, and now White makes another strange pawn move. He did not want to swap the bishops, and he succeeded in that by playing g4, but that really is not a good move. Suddenly that bishop on h3 looks very silly. Bishop c8 is still a good piece, and of course also the queen is cut off and could get into trouble there. Rook g7 from Carlos, d4, and knight f4. Knights like this type of outpost, and this knight cannot be left there with the queen being cornered there on h5. So White took on f4, Carlos took back, and now suddenly the white king is not happy at all. We just saw a variation where the black king was being chased around, but in this position White's king is in danger. e5, a bad move, because that enables black to play f5, and f5 will put pressure on the g4 pawn, which is protecting the king somewhat, and also the battery of bishop e7 and queen d8 will come to life after the f5 push. So e5 is not a good move. Carlos took on e5, d takes e5, and now he rightly pushed f5. It's White who's in big trouble. The best move here is rook a1 to kick the queen away from covering the g5 square. So for example queen f8, and then you can play g5. You have to keep that file closed, and for the moment White is holding on, but black is having all the fun here. White did not play rook a1, he played rook ae1, and that's a bad move, because now Carlos was able to take on g4, opening up the position even more. White took on g4, bishop takes g4, the queen has to go, queen went to h6, and now the discovered check that Carlos mentioned in his introduction, bishop h3 check. White is totally busted. He chooses the least painful death. He played king f2, after which Carlos checkmated the white king with rook g2. Even if White had gone to h1, then it would be bishop g2 check, king g1, and now the strongest move is bishop c5, check, and also this will lead to checkmate. Black is already material up, and his attack on the white king is decisive. What can we say about this game? Some strange moves from white in the opening. f3 was a strange move, c3 was a strange move. Developing your pieces. White waited a long time to develop his queen side. Carlos played very sensibly, very cautiously, and then suddenly lashed out with that g5 move, which was a bit too much. We saw a few variations where the g5 pawn was vulnerable. Then white played the strange g4 move because he didn't want to swap the bishops. That was a bad move. And then e5 was really the losing move because that enabled Carlos to open up the file against white's king. And for a while it looked white was attacking with his queen on h5, but it backfired and Carlos brought home the bacon. A good game from Carlos. I especially liked the 21st move f5. A good game from Carlos. I especially liked the 21st move f5, where Carlos really showed that he knew what was going on. He knew that he had an attack against the white king and he played that really well. The only criticism is, Carlos, be careful with those pawn moves in front of your king. It might have been a rush of blood. You wanted to kick that knight away, but you really have to be careful because pushing pawns in front of your king can lead to trouble. Well played, Carlos, and thank you for sending me this game. Hope you enjoyed this game, hope you learned something from it. If you liked it, please give the video a thumbs up. Please subscribe to the Chess2 Progress channel. I'm looking forward to your comments, and if you liked the video, it would be great if you could share it on YouTube. You also may want to check out my Chess2 Impress channel. The link is in the description box. This is Rick from Chess2 Progress. Thank you very much for watching this video.